Good afternoon. How are you today? Well, there's a slight breeze and it's still pretty warm out, but it's comfortable this time of the day. And we can hear the birds chirping and almost everything is turned completely green by now. The Supreme Court made an action today, and those who have followed the resistance in America to transgender, mostly young people, understand it is not well understood, and that these children are suffering enormously from the bigotry and prejudice of people against their condition. Now, the response by the no-neck, know-nothings is to inquire as to the genitalia or not of students. In other words, it's another wave of invasion. We've invaded women's rights, and now we're going to invade children. And I say it's children because apparently it's around 10 that the child feels, discovers, knows that the part of them that represents their psychology, their person, their genetic material is of the other sex. And that's the simplest way I can put it. Other sex being more than just looking at how one was born, but how one was made to be comfortable in this world. Now, for those who haven't had an association with any person like this, doesn't know what it's about or anything, it's pretty dramatic stuff, and it's raising all sorts of questions about it. And there's a young girl, I think she may be 12 or so now, and she was perceived and considered as a boy, but she is now who she is, Becky, a girl. Now Becky wants to run on the local track team, and she's been doing that. But some tried to invoke a law that said she could not. A judge stayed that decision so that she was able to join the team, and she's run on the team for 2 seasons. She doesn't remarkably change the results in the sense that she brings some extra strength to it that the other girls don't have. She's not displaced anybody who would want to be on the track team. And now there's been a Court of Appeals case that has continued to sustain the stay on applying that law that would exclude her from the team. The Supreme Court was asked to lift the stay, and the judges said no, although two of the usual suspects, the conservatives, said, well, the Court of Appeals should have told us why they issued the stay. And it's because it's a difficult issue. And it's something that we have to pay attention to, because some of these children are being driven to suicide and being hurt in various ways and classified and discriminated against. And if discrimination is considered an offense, that is to say that we're not treating someone equally, we have to wrap our minds around and our practices around how we deal with this. So, and I wonder in a way if people who are sports-minded would care as much if the person had been a girl and who realized she was a he, and that what was suitable and personable and necessary was to be a boy. So the travail of Becky is further complicated by the fact that the administration is moving in a direction to seek regulations on how to treat these children, transgender children. And it sounds to begin like prejudice in the way these rules are going to be written. So it would be premature to presume our government couldn't figure this out to the benefit of equality, but it does happen. So this is something to watch for, and it is something to think about, because your child, your friend, yourself, this is a significant issue, and we are not hermaphroditic, but we are a complex creature, each of us, and we have to write laws that correspond to what we discover, and we're discovering things all the time, those of us who care about science and investigation and putting these things together. I think you may have noticed a trend that I've noticed, and I think Wisconsin is a good example, and Tennessee are two good examples of how we, the people, are dealing with injustice in our system. Now, in Wisconsin, we just had a very challenging race, and the candidate who ascended to the Supreme Court by vote with, I think, an 11% margin, if I have my stats right. And this is significant because the races in Wisconsin have been very close in terms of numbers. That one of the reasons that she won was because in Wisconsin they are writing backward laws about abortion. They're not doing anything about guns. The governor and the Supreme Court approved gerrymander lines so that only Republicans would be elected. And so this is at the ballot box a rebuff, an antidote to bad practices, corrupt, using power, violating the notion of what's an appropriate district for representation in order to have the representation be partisan, a preferred way by those in the position to write the rules on those. So that's very interesting. And we're not going to have a more regularized system until our society decides to accept the law and to not do these unctuous, autocratic, overbearing pressures on the system just to win. We want the power. King of the mountain, like kids. I don't know if you ever did it, but usually a mound of dirt, somebody's at the top, and you're pulling at each other to pull down. Well, that's just a game, but that metaphor is what some of these people want. Now, in Tennessee, we have a situation in which, after the shootings and so forth, 3 members did demonstrations in the chambers, and they're being called out, and they're going to have a vote, which is probably over by the time you hear this. I post this little walk and talk, and they'll probably all 3 lose their positions. And somebody said, why did they do it? And it is within, it seems to me, the range of civic disobedience. And I don't know all the facts yet, and I can be corrected, but my sense of it is they did shout and cause the chamber to pay attention to laws that matter, including the gun deaths. And they're being treated as the crazy ones because they dared to say it in such a way that it compromised the business of the chamber. Now, civic disobedience means that if you do violate some law provision that has a sanction, you have decided to fall on your sword. And the question is the martyrdom worth it? Well, it's not our decision to make. It is the decision of the person who does what Bill Douglas spoke about a long time ago, and a lot of other people through the history of this country, that an action to protest something like, the Darrigan brothers did during the Vietnam War, poured blood on draft materials and were prosecuted for it. These kinds of, and they were tried for it and so forth. So you have to keep in mind that we have a rich history of civil disobedience by those who are prepared to pay for what they do. And then there are a couple of other short things on my mind. One is the threats to the court cannot stand. And far from me to tell a judge what to do, although that's what you do as a law clerk, and they listen or they don't, because they are in charge. And but if I was a law clerk, I'd invite the government to draft proposals to deal with the apparent violation of my oral discussion in court at the time of Mr. Trump's arraignment, and have them bring their bodies to the court next Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, and have some improvised but just first step. This happens again, more is going to happen to you. Absolutely necessary, because this guy doesn't learn. And just making him pay money sanctions, nah. You got to do something. You have to cut his liberty and deal with it that way. The environmental news is a little disconcerting. Years ago, Holly, my wife, and I, we went down to Antarctica, and we managed to touch the earth, and we were all bundled up, of course, and it was considered the spring in Antarctica. Well, the spring has gotten a lot warmer, and now they're losing 2,000 feet of frozen ice every day. The waters of the earth will rise. They can't do anything else. So, as I've said before, don't buy beach property in the Outer Banks. Certainly not with a house on it. The situation we find ourselves in is we're having to struggle back to a republic, to a democracy. And we're not getting there well. And one of the reasons we're not getting there is because we blunt the bad news. We don't say it like it truly is. Maybe people can't believe it, and maybe they think they have to verify some things, but we don't come out and call it as it is. And I think the Wisconsin thing and the Tennessee thing are examples of what we have to pay attention to. That we, the people, are going to have to prod our elected representatives to protest and to cause trouble for those who violate our laws and are not forced to account for their misconduct. You know, I think of the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, no jacket Jordan. This guy is a clown of the first order, but he can do as much damage if we stand by. And it drives me crazy that we don't have people saying, this is wrong. He's wrong. He shouldn't be interfering with the state prosecution. What happened to the states are always right. Would you do this if it wasn't Trump? If you didn't want to protect him at all cost, even from his criminal misbehavior? We don't have that discussion. And it's a big mistake. And you know my preference, which is you can't win the arguments you don't make. And we're not making them now. And that's a problem. That's a real problem. So, I talked to you today from my Cathedral of Trees. And I'm sure I'll talk to you tomorrow. All the best. Bye-bye.